Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, 5-week party on Clambake. In the last several episodes, we've been listening to a lot of the hijinks that Elvis has been up to on the set of Clambake. And we've heard from some of the guys that were with him, the Memphis Mafia, including Charlie Hodge. And we heard from his co-star, Will Hutchins. And today, we're going to hear more from both those people. Hi, Keith. Hi, Marion. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you both here. We're going to start off with a song. And this is He Gave Away His Heart.
Midnight lights, rhinestone fire, Arabian suit, burning with desire. He hit the stage like thunder rolls. Vegas shook and the story unfolds. Charlie's birthday, crowd went wild. He cracked a joke, then sang with style. But just before he sang Hurt So Deep, he stopped the show and made us weep. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. Black in hair, the man stepped near. Elvis smiled, the crowd could hear. Thanks to you, we raised the light. 17,000 hearts took flight. Then back behind the velvet door, he gave away a little more. Music ring, a boxcar shine, a suit that held his sacred time. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. He didn't need applause to know his worth. He gave away his soul in Vegas mud. Not just a king, but something more. A man who knew what hearts were for. Gave away his heart, not just a soul. Pieces of love where the brave belong. Ritual gifts from the man backstage. He saved the hurting, he the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I'll never be the same. I was there, I saw the rings, I saw the light. Gave away his heart, and it burned so bright.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today, we're going to hear more echoes from Charlie Hodge and Will Hutchins. But first, we're going to reorient ourselves in the time period Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. So we know from a previous episode, so if you missed any of those previous episodes, be sure that you head back into the archive and you can watch the replays of the live episodes. And in one of them, a couple of them, we learned that on March 15th, 1967, Jerry Schilling and his girlfriend, his fiancée, Sandy, two people who were integral to the horse and the Circle G dream, they got married. But now we know something else that happened on March 15th, 1967. A famous person, a celebrity, they wrote a letter to Elvis Presley. It was sent airmail. Not sure when he received it, probably sometime in March. And this letter says, March 15th, 1967, My dear Elvis, your Colonel Parker was absolutely sensational and so kind to me when I spent 2 days at Metro last month making a segment of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. I am so sorry that you were not in Los Angeles at the time, but I hope to see you soon so that I can thank you personally for all the kindness that you and Colonel Parker bestowed upon me. I love your new album that Colonel Parker gave me. He also gave me the use of your golf cart during the 2 days I was there. And he was so sweet about having cold Pepsi-Colas for us. My very best wishes to you, Elvis, and I hope that you have a happy Easter. Joan. And this is Joan Crawford. And so the month before would have been sometime in February. Well, Elvis was purchasing and supplying the Circle G Ranch while they were riding the horses around, having a great time. Joan Crawford was in Los Angeles, and Colonel Parker was showing hospitality to her. And she got to drive around on Elvis's golf cart. That seems fun. And that she liked it enough that she wanted to send a thank you note. She probably sent one to Colonel Parker, but she also sent one to Elvis, who wasn't even there. So just a little piece that ties Elvis back into the Hollywood community. Hi, Linda Jewell. Thank you so much for coming today. Appreciate seeing you here. So Elvis and Joan Crawford, who knew they were even friends? Now she says that Colonel Parker, he gave her Elvis's new album, and she really likes it. What album is that? Well, it's this one. How Great Thou Art. Or How Great Thou Art. A new album of sacred selections from RCA Victor. And Elvis answers his fans' many requests for more sacred songs as he sings How Great Thou Art in the garden, somebody bigger than you and I, farther along, stand by me, without him, so high, where could I go but to the Lord, by and by, if the Lord wasn't walking by my side, run on, where no one stands alone. And as an extra bonus, his million seller Crying in the Chapel. So this is the album that Joan Crawford really likes. And we know that the songs on this album were played in a nationwide broadcast 4 days after Joan wrote that thank you letter. Probably around the time Elvis received the thank you letter. I'm thinking he got it the 20th or the 21st, maybe. Obviously, it came from another country. It was airmail. And this was an advertisement, I believe, in Billboard magazine. Might be wrong about that, but I think it was Billboard. And it says, "How Great Thou Art." His first religious LP sold as well as a hit pop album. This will do the same. Listening to tunes like "Somebody Bigger Than You and I" and "Stand By Me," you know where Presley got his style of singing. From the gospel field. It's great. So this was an early advertisement for the album, pushing it out there to people, telling them that it's great. But Elvis went a little further than that. He let you listen to it on the radio for free. RCA pressed a bunch of special records that they sent to more than 276 radio stations, and in some cities, more than 6 radio stations at a time, or in the city, played the broadcast. They may have played it at different times. It's possible you could have heard it nearly all day long if you were in the right city. And Elvis sent that out there to all these radio stations for free. And on March 19th, Palm Sunday, that was Elvis Radio Network Day, where he had his own nationwide network, only for a moment, only for a day, only for these sacred gospel songs. And later on, I'm not sure how much money Elvis made from this album. Some people say the Colonel had to pay to get the radio stations to play the album. The free one that they sent them. I don't know if that's true. I don't know how much was invested in this and what the ROI was, the return on investment. But as far as art goes, as far as being recognized within the industry, Presley's art strikes gold. New York City. Elvis Presley's RCA album, "How Great Thou Art," has been certified for a gold record by the RIAA. Presley was also voted a Grammy for the Best Sacred Performance of 1967 for the same album. With this award, Presley has earned 42 gold records, 32 for singles, 10 for LPs. The RCA artist has 2 singles on the charts, "Stay Away" and "U.S. Mail," and an album, Elvis's Gold Records, Volume 4. So this article's from a little bit after the time period that we're really looking at. But that album comes out in March 1967, and it goes on to win a Grammy. And it's certified for a gold record, so it sold a lot of copies. Brought Elvis a lot of acclaim. And it spread the word of God. So I think that Elvis might have seen this one as an important project. Something that meant something. But now we're going to get back to clam bake. And it's kind of the opposite. Elvis doesn't see clam bake as a great piece of art. perhaps not even a great piece of entertainment. Now, a lot of people, they've already told us they love clam bake. They find a lot of enjoyment in clam bake. And all of Elvis's movies, family friendly. I mean, he's left a great legacy. But at the moments that he was making it, well, maybe that's not true either. At the moments he was making it, like in this picture, where he's looking at the beautiful Shelley Fabares, and he's maybe really playing or something on guitar in between the takes. I'm sure he's having fun right here. I mean, who wouldn't be having fun right here? So he has fun with the co-stars. He has fun with the guys on the set. It's not the fun part when he's not having fun. That's when he's looking at the script. He's recording these songs. He's listening to the demo songs. He's hearing about the business of setting up the next movie. These are all the non-fun parts. And that's the parts that are getting to him. And Charlie Hodge says, when Elvis got a little bored with making clam bake, I walked out on the set one morning. It was the original Phantom of the Opera movie set, and a bucket of water hit me from way up on one of the high catwalks. So if you've ever seen the movie from the 1920s, The Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney, you might have seen the catwalks that Charlie's talking about. Hi, Luann. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate seeing you here, and happy coffee. And Marion says that in her opinion, Elvis's first gospel album deserved a Grammy as well. I think that could be true. I also think it helped pave the way to the acceptance of such albums so that they did consider this one for a Grammy. Like, I don't think they were ready back then to give that one a Grammy because it was Elvis. And Luann says that Elvis attracted her attention by his movies when she was a teen. It was movies like this, Clam Bake, where he's on the beach singing to beautiful women. And Will Hutchins says the camera loved Elvis. I'm sure if the Colonel had allowed him to accept meteor roles, he'd have won an Oscar. He was the most talented fellow I ever worked with. Sometimes I'd feel a tad lost. One take Elvis and 20 take Hutchins. We can see Elvis and Will on screen in a take. Will's wearing what Elvis had been wearing, a rich man's suit. For some odd reason, it has this pattern that looks like the stitching on a baseball. I still don't understand that. Elvis is in what appears to be a blue suit. And of course, Will's wearing a matching white cowboy hat that goes with the white suit he's got on. That had been Elvis's, but they've traded places. And Will's telling us that Elvis generally, one take. He rolled the cameras, Elvis does his stuff, it's done. Elvis was that way a lot in the recording booth too, in the studio. They would work for a while on the song, and then when they took it, and a lot of the guys, the band members would say that, the studio musicians, you better be ready and you better be on your best game, because whatever you're putting down on that first track, that might be what makes it onto the record, because Elvis isn't going to do another take. And he was like that doing the movies too. But Will's telling us that he would sometimes have to have 20 takes. Probably an exaggeration, but it's Will's way of saying that he made mistakes. that he did things that would require them all to do it again. And that he did it enough that he felt a little bit out of his league with Elvis, because Elvis is nailing everything first or second take. Now, Will, he had worked on TV. And in television, you usually get to a point where you're doing everything first or second take. So that is somewhat surprising, but he is in a feature film, and feature films are known to have a little more time to feel out the role and to get to try out the performance. But these movies, they were making on a schedule that was much more similar to television. So it is kind of surprising, but Will had been on a show called Sugarfoot. And he, I believe, was the lead character. So that had lasted several years. And he'd been in a few other things. Charlie Hodge says that later on in that day, he looked up and another bucket of water hit me. My shirt was soaked. I took it off and neatly placed it in front of a heater to dry out. Then I went to the wardrobe department and I got a dry shirt to put on. So Charlie, he's just walking around on this set, and these guys up there, which include Elvis, are up in the catwalks, and they're dumping buckets of water on him. Now he's had to go take his shirt off. And it's not even his shirt, it's a wardrobe department shirt. So the wardrobe, luckily, has another one that fits him. And because it's the wardrobe department shirt, it sounds like maybe this is one of the days that Charlie was actually in the movie. Like maybe when he did the barber scene. But his shirt is soaked. So he hangs it up and he goes off to do whatever he's got to do. And he's got it hanging in front of a heater that's out there on the set. And Marion's saying that she loved the comparison that Elvis made of Elvis to an onion that Will made. And that I posted in the chat at the very end of the last episode. So hopefully we're going to make it back to that quote again today, but we're going to see it again. And it is a beautiful quote. And Luann says that she had mentioned a few months back that she doesn't know why the 1960s Elvis movies didn't get to Australia until the 1970s. Well, it's part of the revenue streams. So once they made these movies, you know, like today, there's a known path for a movie. If you have a movie that's actually gonna be in a theater, well, eventually that movie's going to travel through the theater circuits, which there are theaters that play first-run movies, and even today there are theaters that play not first-run movies. I don't know what they even call them, because you never hear them called second or third-run movies, but what it means is, well, in the old days, they would print the film, and it would come on these giant film rolls, and I mean these were gigantic. They're like 70 pounds a piece, and you would need several of them to create the whole movie, and you had to have special systems set up within your theater that could handle moving these things around and putting them onto the projectors. So the projectors are much larger than like any of the film projectors we might have seen in school. They're gigantic. And that's why you never see them in the theater. They're behind all these walls. Well, somebody got that film first and they showed it first. And then it moved on to another theater. Then it moved on to another theater. Every time it moved, it got all scratched up. And after a while, they couldn't rent. That's what they would call it. When you got the film and you showed it, you rented it. And this is how Elvis got his movies to watch at the movie theaters when he watched them in the middle of the night. There's a place that has all these films. It's a film depot. And there's like one in every major city. You know, anywhere there's a bunch of theaters around. And then all of these films would come there and they would rent them out to the different theaters. And you would get them for so long. Well, his guys would call and say, what do you have at the depot that's new? And they would rent it and have it sent to one of the theaters. And that's how it would be there for them to watch it, even if that theater wasn't showing it. You know, if that theater was showing it bonus, they just watched it. But he could get basically whatever he wanted, as long as he could rent it through the depot. Well, when it got really scratched up, nobody wanted to pay first run price. So then it would go to the second run theaters, which are theaters that would have a very cheap admission. And I went to a lot of those as a teenager, or the drive-ins, which I also went to. The drive-ins were all second and third run movies. So back then, you would never see a brand new Elvis movie at the drive-in. It would have been a few months later. Well, eventually you run out of these theaters. And then the movie's dead. You're not making any more money on it. But this television thing came along, and somebody eventually figured out we could put these movies. Now you have to do something with them unless they were filmed in the same format as television, which all the old movies, everything from the 20s up to the 1950s, was filmed in the same aspect ratio that they showed on television. So it was easy to transfer those. When they got into these wider screen formats, then they just basically cut the middle out and they put that on television. And television, the networks would pay in order to run it. So one of the things Tom Parker did, Colonel Parker, was he set up those deals with the networks. So one of the networks would eventually show interest. We want to show this Elvis movie. Then what Tom would do is get as high a number from them as he could possibly get for what they were going to rent the movie for. And then he'd call each of the other networks and he'd say, well, these guys are about to show this Elvis movie. Do you want to show it instead? All you got to do is offer more money. And sometimes they'd offer more money. And sometimes he'd go through them 3 or 4 times and he'd keep raising the price. And then Elvis would make $250,000 without getting out of bed because he'd already put all the money, all the work into this thing. But Colonel would make a deal to rent this thing onto the networks, and then whatever these guys rented it for, Elvis would get this huge chunk out of it. But you can't rent it to everybody in the world at once because then there's no exclusivity. So everything's got to play in the US first. And then eventually Colonel will get around to making the deals for the other countries. Similar to the way that RCA spread the music around. It always started in the US and then they slowly moved it out into their other global network because they were all over the world. But that's a sidelight into how Elvis Presley business worked. It was probably pretty boring. We'll pull it back to Clambake here. But Luann says that being a teenager in the 1970s, she thought Elvis was his movie fashions and was aware that they were made in the 60s. But because she was a kid, she just thought that's how Elvis always looked. That's a good point, Luann, because people still do that today. You think of Elvis in a certain outfit or style, and then for you, that becomes Elvis. And no matter what period of time you think about him in, that's your Elvis. Now, as you get further into the Elvis journey, for those that become, the fans and they start digging in deeper, then I think that your mental picture of Elvis spreads out, of course. And then you have distinct periods like the young Elvis and the 60s Elvis and the 70s Elvis. But I think for a lot of the world, they have one picture of Elvis, and that's the way Elvis was all the time. And that includes everything that was around him and like his habits, like shooting out televisions, right? He didn't just shoot out a television. He must have shot 2 or 3 out every day. That's the way that a non-Elvis fan out in the public would see it, because that's just a habit that's associated with Elvis. But in truth, a lot of these things only happened a few times. But they get stuck with Elvis as a piece of the myth. And it doesn't matter what time period you're telling a story about, people think that's the way that it was at that moment. So one of the things I'm trying to do is show how it really was at the moment, and then it changes the perspective of all the events that happened to Elvis. And Will Hutchins says, on Clambake, we were in the throes of the title song number, with Sir Swivel shimmying, scantily clad starlet sparkling, and me more foolish than usual. So Will's telling us about a story that happens on the set of Clambake, and that they're doing a song, and he says Sir Swivel is shimmying. Okay, Sir Swivel, that's Swivel Hips Elvis. So Elvis is out here and he's dancing. And Will says, scantily clad starlet sparkling. Okay, so there's a girl out here with him, and she's not wearing much. And she's very good looking because she's a starlet. And Will is more foolish than usual, which means that he does something. So Will says, suddenly, a tiki torch was knocked over by an overzealous writher. A starlet's sarong caught fire. Without missing a beat, Elvis pulled a long tablecloth out from under all the goodies and wrapped said starlet up, putting out one fire, starting another. Will tells us that his foolishness is that he is writhing around a little more than dancing. He's probably not, he sees himself as not much of a dancer. And so his movements are really more writhing. And while he's doing that, he knocks over a lit tiki torch. And this woman who is on stage with them, wearing probably something similar to a bikini and a sarong, like a little skirt, the little skirt catches fire. And so this is very serious. Like, she is actually going to get hurt and be burned. But Elvis is so cool that he whips out a tablecloth from under the food on the table like a magician. He whips out this tablecloth out from under everything that's on it, and he wraps the woman up and he puts the fire out, saving her from harm. And apparently she enjoys being wrapped up because that's the start of another fire. So here's a story about Elvis being a hero. In the moment, when somebody could have been hurt, when things could have gone much, much worse, just like Elvis had been training for all this time with his karate, he doesn't panic, doesn't even think. He springs into action, whips the tablecloth out with the dexterity, that he's learned through karate and that he's naturally graced with. And he saves this woman from harm. And he saves Will from having to spend a lifetime of thinking about the harm that he had done this woman, because he's the one that set her sarong on fire. Now in the picture, we can see Bill Bixby, and he's looking at the beautiful Shelley, and she's looking off into the distance. And whoever's doing the lighting, they're doing a wonderful job, because if you look at her eyes, you can clearly see two distinct lights in her eyes. That doesn't just happen. That's not happenstance. When you see a picture that's taken by a professional and they have these lights in the eyes, they put them there on purpose. You can watch a lot of YouTube videos now, and it's women talking into the camera. You see their face, and a lot of them, you will see a light, pinpoint of light in their eye. They've set a light up to do that on purpose. Okay, this is not, it can't just happen. And when you have two lights, well, that's a special kind of setup. And Bill Bixby looks very entranced with Shelley in this picture. And Luann says that she couldn't get used to Elvis with long, fluffy hair with the sideburns. Anything that was different from his movies. So, Luann, were you not a fan of the jumpsuits? I love the jumpsuits, and I actually really like the long hair for the most part, and the big sideburns. On Elvis. On other people, it gets out of control, but on Elvis, it tended to look good. And Marion says, great story about Elvis being a hero. Will says that one day Elvis invited me into his trailer. He put an LP on the turntable. I reckoned I was about to be the first kid on my block to hear his latest album. Instead, what issued forth was the mellow voice of the great French actor Charles Boyer reciting love poems. Elvis said, Will, come on into the trailer. Which is a special sacred place, right? Only so many people get to visit Elvis inside his personal trailer. This is probably the same space that we've heard Larry Geller talk about, where he says that he's no longer able to be alone with Elvis. The same space where the Elvis was very angry and talked about the books that they had been reading together and indicated that he had come to the conclusion that the people who wrote these books were attempting to manipulate the minds of others for their own gain. And Larry denied that Larry stated he didn't see that in the books. And that wasn't his purpose in reading the books. And at the end of the conversation, it appears that Elvis had asked Larry to forget about what he was saying, that it was just him, that he was having some personal issues with the line of study that they'd been having. But at the same time, Larry couldn't be... Larry noticed that there were no instances where he was now alone with Elvis. He took that to mean that orders had been given. Others seem to think the same thing, but we can't find anybody that says, I got an order. So it's not clear whether Elvis couldn't be alone with Larry or whether Elvis just never took an effort to be alone with Larry, but it would be inside the same trailer. And Elvis puts on a record onto the record player. And of course, Will thinks it's going to be Elvis music or some music, but it's not music at all. It's a guy that's reciting love poetry. I don't know that I've ever heard another story where Elvis is listening to somebody read love poetry. So this is an interesting story for sure. And of course, it stuck with Will that Elvis was involved in something that he had not associated with Elvis. That's why he remembers this. Now, getting back to Charlie Hodge and his wet shirt. So he took that shirt and he put it up to hang and dry in front of that heater. And he's hoping that, I guess that it'll get dry pretty soon. That I don't know what he's going to do with it. Return it to the wardrobe, I guess. I guess there's a possibility it's really his shirt. And he doesn't have a spare shirt. And so when it got wet, he went to the wardrobe and they loaned him a shirt. I guess that's possible too. So maybe it's not the day that he's filming whatever. Maybe that was just fanciful thoughts on my part. So maybe this is his shirt and that's why he's got to make sure it gets dry. But Charlie says, every 20 minutes or so, I'd go back and feel my shirt to see if it was getting dry. Felt as wet as ever. Couldn't understand it. So on this day on the set, Charlie, he's got a mystery on his hands. But Will Hutchins, he says Arthur Nadell, okay, now Arthur is the man who's the director of this movie. Arthur has a history in Hollywood already. But after this, he's going to go on. I guess some people would not see this as a move up. And I'm not sure career-wise whether it's a move up, down, sideways, but he begins to work for Filmation Studios. And some of you may know Filmation Studios because they produced a whole lot of cartoons. So like in the late 70s, they produced The New Adventures of Batman, which was a continuation of the Batman 1966 television live action series. And it had Adam West and Burt Ward as the voices. They also did like He-Man and the Masters of the Universe in the 80s. That was their big giant one then. They did a million other ones. And during a long portion of that, especially in the 70s and 80s, Arthur was heavily involved. He was an executive there, and he worked directly with Lou Scheimer, who owned Filmation. So if you're into cartoons and animation history, Arthur, who directs this movie, Clambake, with Elvis in it, and it has a lot of fun. Apparently, he's willing to have fun on the set. The guys really like him. Well, he goes on, he makes a lot of great cartoons that people are still watching today. But Will says Arthur Nadell and Elvis were very supportive. And a lot of the gags and dialogue that appeared on screen were nowhere to be found in the script. So Will is actually justifying the hijinks and shenanigans, and as he called it, stag party that's going on during the 5 weeks of this filming. Because out of all this, they've become very creative. And the director is supportive of that, and they got a lot more gags and dialogue into the movie than actually appeared in the script. So when those of you who watch this movie and love it, some of that, it comes directly from Elvis having fun. So that may be what you're seeing in the movie, what you're feeling. Elvis truly was having fun with Will, and it's showing up in some of the scenes. It's showing up unscripted in some of the scenes. But let's get back to Charlie Hodge and his wet shirt that he's attempting to get dry, that he's hung in front of this heater. Checked it every 20 minutes or so. That just isn't getting any drier. And Charlie Hodge says, at the end of the day, I checked the shirt again, still soaking wet. I walked away from it. Then I sneaked back and peered around the corner. There was Elvis, spraying it with a fire extinguisher. He had been doing that all day long. And as soon as I felt it, he'd come back and spray it again. This fire extinguisher that Elvis is using is an old type of fire extinguisher that would have sprayed out water. Like today, if you sprayed somebody's shirt with a fire extinguisher, it would get some kind of chemical all over it, depending on what kind of fire extinguisher, what kind of fire it was supposed to put out. Back then, this would have been like a pressurized container that shot out water. Kind of like you might use today in a garden to spray insecticide or something else that you needed to spray. And then you pump it a little bit and then it sprays out. This would have been something like that. But Elvis has been playing this prank on Charlie all day. And every time Charlie walks away from that shirt, he's got guys watching that tell him, he runs back over there with that fire extinguisher and he hoses that shirt back down. Make sure that it stays nice and wet. On screen, we can see Elvis on the beach with Shelley. And they have a little, I think they have a fire going, but they may be getting ready to start a fire. Definitely got some logs in front of them. It looks like there's a flame there, but it's a black and white photo, so I can't be sure. They both appear to be looking at somebody outside of the picture and interacting with them. Like somebody's talking to them and they're getting ready to respond. Will Hutchins says there was a deep feeling of teamwork and camaraderie. Let me start over. There was a deep feeling of teamwork and camaraderie on the set. Elvis kept everyone's spirits high. Will says that is telling us that it is fun on the set and that people feel like they're part of a team, and that's due to Elvis. Elvis is a natural leader and he knows how to keep morale up. He knows how to keep the team motivated, and even though he may not be in love with this movie, even though he may be having his issues with the executives, possibly with Colonel Parker, possibly with his father Vernon, possibly with the county where he's trying to get the trailers hooked up at Circle G. possibly with so many other issues of his life. But here, on set, as they're taking care of business, Elvis is a leader, and he smooths everything through so that they can get this production done, and that it will be a good production. And he's done a good job because they're capturing that feeling of fun, that sense of camaraderie. They're getting it on film, and it's increasing the production value. And you still feel it today. So he knew what he was doing. In this poster for Clam Bake, this would have been all these ones with the yellow borders. These are lobby cards. So when you went to see the movie, these would have been very large, and they would have probably been on easels, or maybe attached to the wall. But they would have been in the lobby for the most part of the movie theaters. And there was a whole set of them. And so it would be kind of like Clam Bake had taken over the entire lobby of the movie theater. So if you're there and you don't really know what movie you're there to see, what movie are we going to see, honey? And you look around and the whole place is covered in these Clam Bake posters, or lobby cards, as they call them, then there was a better chance that you would choose to watch this movie. And so I don't know how closely Colonel Parker is connected to the lobby cards, but there's lobby cards for virtually every Elvis movie. And I feel like he must have had a large part in having those printed. I think RCA paid for them. Or not RCA, but the studio who put out the movie paid for him, but it was part of his promotional package. Like it's something he would get written into the contract. But on this particular one, you can see a beautiful woman in a bikini on a surfboard. You can see Elvis is watching this beautiful woman on the surfboard closely. And there's some guys picking up the surfboard, and apparently they're going to carry her around or some such. Some kind of clam baking fun. And in this lobby card, Elvis is holding two beautiful women, both in bikinis. He's got a grin on his face that's almost a leer. And if you look carefully at the background, you can see that they're sitting in a clamshell, which is appropriate because this is the movie Clam Bake. And Charlie Hodge, who's had the wet shirt all day, finally figured out what's going on. Charlie says Elvis came out of his dressing room to do a scene. Richard Davis, his valet, hit him from the same catwalk with a balloon filled with water. Elvis looked up and said quietly, without anger, "I'll get you for that." Elvis went back into his dressing room and came back out a few minutes later in a dry costume and did his scene. And then he found a heavy fire hose and he blasted Richard off of that catwalk. Now, if you've been with us for previous episodes, you've seen Richard Davis. And he normally stands in for Elvis for the lights, for the blocking, stuff like that. He's roughly Elvis's size and shape. So he can be a stand-in for Elvis for a lot of stuff. And that's what they call him, a stand-in. But he also takes care of Elvis's clothing. That's why Charlie calls Richard Elvis's valet. And Charlie, he's not the only one getting hit with water. Now, they didn't hit Elvis with a bucket of water, but Richard got him with a balloon, water-filled balloon. And then Elvis got Richard with a fire hose. And a fire hose, it puts out a lot of water, a lot more than your garden hose. And with that, we've reached the end of the stories of clam bake for today. We've still got a lot more clam bake to do. So in the next episode, we'll continue with stories from Will and from Charlie and from others until we reach the end of this clam bake production. And then we're going to be moving on to a wedding. And then we're going to get back to the Circle G. So that's all coming up in the very near future. And Marion says that she would have loved to have witnessed these clam bake weeks, even if just as a fly on the wall. And I agree, it seems like it would have been a lot of fun. Because it does seem like he was having fun once the production got started. But until I see you guys again next time, I'm going to leave you with this song about cars that Elvis gave to his friends. It's called Trust in Motion. And until I see you again, you all keep on taking care of business.
Radio static, Memphis bound, WABQ homes a sacred sound. Green, green grass, again and again. A DJ's risk for a loyal friend. Elvis smiles, no words exchanged, just a test of love on a range. Keys in the dark, showroom glow, a Cadillac waits in a silent show. Merry Christmas, GK said, a yellow chariot, tears on shade. What's fame and fortune worth, my friend, if it's not something we can lend? The Chevy Impala, still shining new, passed from blind to the Circle G crew. Gary